Well, okay, I'm going to shoot off the big gun straight
Okay,
away,
great.
and I could be wrong about this, but I've been observing the events over the last few days, and it seems to me that there may have been some kind of a palace coup in Washington D.C. at the White House.
Right.
And the reason why I suspect this is because, uh, first we had, oh, I have to not miss the name. First we had forgive me,
No, it's okay.
I have to look at my notes because first we had allegedly the CENTCOM head, General Michael Kurilla, go to Israel. And there, apparently, he told the Israeli leadership that, if they provoke a conflict with Hezbollah or with Iran, that they're on their own. The United States is not going to come to their rescue. So that's kind of big.
Yes.
And then we had this whole crescendo by the Brits who came to, last Saturday, British Prime Minister Keir Starmer was in Washington, and they were going to sign an agreement for the United States to escalate the conflict against Russia with long-range precision missiles to shoot into Russia proper, which
Right.
isn't necessarily a new thing, but apparently it was going to be raised to a whole new level.
Right.
And, the fact that Prime Minister went to Washington is very significant because Prime Minister wouldn't normally go there to discuss this.
Right.
Prime Minister would go there for the signing and for the subsequent press conference, where they express their joint statement and where they stand and how they're devoted to freedom and democracy and human rights and free speech and all of these wonderful things. But apparently it got stopped at the last moment, and then there was no deal. And I'm not sure if there was a press conference. I
No.
honestly, there wasn't a press conference,
No.
which is extremely weird because that's
Yes.
that's the occasion where the press with their pre-formulated questions
Right.
would get everything that they need to print in the newspapers the next day. Well, this would be very awkward, and then they wouldn't know what questions to ask and how to explain that the deal wasn't done. So it seems to me that the probably the Pentagon, maybe CENTCOM, maybe I don't know who, Joint Chiefs of Staff. I wouldn't know who, and I don't know that we're going to necessarily know. There's not going to be one of those third world moments when the military generals come out
Right.
and announce, like, guess what, we're in charge now.
Right. Right.
But it seems to me that they're effectively they may be in charge, at least in terms of the conduct of foreign policy, military as well as diplomatic.
Yep.
And that's a huge deal. And I think it's extremely good news for everybody else because maybe we just were spared the nuclear exchange
Right.
and a massive escalation to World War II. I want to also go back to the role of the Brits in all this because they've been lobbying for this for a very long time. There was a few days ago the prank call, no, exactly a week ago. It was released on the 12th September. Prank call between the two Russian pranksters, Vovan and Lexis, with the Foreign Minister of Poland, Radek Sikorski. And one of the things that grabbed my attention in that whole interview, which was about 25 minutes, I suggest everybody watch it because I think it's a phenomenal piece of intelligence. Radek Sikorski said that, we are trying to encourage the Americans to agree to this striking of the United States with long-range missiles. And so the question is, we who says we are trying to encourage them? So, here's where people need to know who Radek Sikorski is. Radek Sikorski used to be a British subject before he went into politics in Poland and changed citizenship back to Polish citizens. He was educated at Oxford. He was a member of the Bullingdon Club. And this is a super exclusive British club by invitation only. He was recruited into the Bullingdon Club by none other than Boris Johnson, former British Prime Minister.
Right.
Other alumni of the Bullingdon Club are people like Lord David Cameron, the last foreign minister and ex-prime minister of Britain, George Osborne, the Chancellor of the Exchequer under David Cameron, Nat Rothschild, the scion of the London Rothschild family there, son of Jacob Rothschild. And a whole bunch of these people. And generations before, you had Lord Halifax, who was one of the key people who cooked up World War II. Yeah. So I think that this is the viper's nest of we,
Yes.
We that Radek Sikorski was referring to. Now, Keir Starmer is not that part of we, not the exclusive part of we. He's a bit beneath that level, but nevertheless, I think that this is still where the imperial strategy and ideology emanates from. And the United States is, used as the political, diplomatic, military muscle to enforce these things. But now it appears that there must be a counterforce somewhere in the bowels of the system. And somebody with, power to say no went to the Biden administration, to Blinken, to Sullivan, I don't know who, right, and told them, no, you're not doing this. You're not plunging us into World War III in an adventure that has no visible upside, but it has a massive downside for everybody else. Just because you suckers can't take that you are defeated, that you lost this one. Yeah, the 2014 episode, to be fair to Trump, came before him.
Right.
He was in the office in 2016, but I don't think he was. I think that as much as he wanted to, and there's good evidence that he did want to, he was unable to turn the juggernaut around. He was overruled on many things, and where he wasn't overruled, he was harassed to the point that, he couldn't pull his weight through that morass of a problem. But you're absolutely right that there was something profoundly wrong in Ukraine, and for a very long time. Right. George Soros has bragged that he was active in Ukraine since 1991 or 1990. Right. He was in Russia proper already with his, foundations or whatever he had in 1987. And the cooperation between Ukraine and NATO initiated in 1991. By 1997, they had a formalized agreement about a distinctive partnership. And so they already started, preparing Ukraine, weaponizing the whole society, right, to serve the purpose of being the bludgeon with which to destroy Russia. And they've done everything they could, including coddling and incubating these various neo-Nazi movements, providing them enormous arsenal of weapons, giving them enormous political power. Because remember, at the first elections after the coup in 2014, you had the Pravi sector, the right sector, right, and the other party. It escapes me now. I'll remember it. Okay. They together didn't get 2% of the vote, of the popular vote. They're combined, they got 1.6% of the vote. These, extreme right neo-Nazis. Right. Nevertheless, they got 5 key cabinet posts in the new government, and they got, I think, 8 or so of these oblasts, right, the governorships, which were extremely important. And then these neo-Nazi groups were, policing the streets of major Ukrainian cities. The weapons were coming in from NATO, the training was coming in from NATO, or the troops were going to Poland, to the UK, to United States, to Canada for training. And there was definite talk about placing missile launch facilities in the vicinity of Chernobyl and in the vicinity of Kharkov. And so that would place the U.S. Missile launch site so close to Russia that it would effectively deprive them of the nuclear deterrent. You know, the time from launch to these missiles striking their targets was then too short for Russians to mount a counteroffensive. And whether they were planning to do this or not in 2021, 22. The Western side, these neocons, definitely gave every signal to the Russians to persuade them that this is what they intend to do. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
When you mount the threat, to convince the other party that you're going to be doing it.
Right.
But I think that probably the real purpose wasn't actually launching a new preemptive nuclear attack on Russia, which is what they were, talking about, but rather to provoke Russia into attacking Ukraine, which is what did actually happen. And nevertheless, this threat never went away. And in addition to threatening Russians with the nukes, they have also lined the Russian border with all these biolabs, where they were developing biological and chemical weapons. And the narrative was that they used Ukrainians. I mean, the narrative, the let's call it conspiracy theories, but they're very credible. Right. That they were using the Ukrainian population for their genetic similarity to the Russian, or many of them are Russians, in order to be able to develop biological weapons that would particularly target the Russian genotype. I don't know if this is even realistic, but they were trying to do it nonetheless. Well, I think that something is happening. There's definite rumblings in among the masses, and the way I read them, I think it's all turning against the DNC, the Biden administration, and particularly the neocons. And we see that in some ways it's scoring concrete victories. One of them being that United States will not support striking Russia with long-range weapons. Right. One of them saying to Israel, "Okay, you're on your own." Apparently, people like Antony Blinken have been cut out of the decision-making loop in the conduct of foreign policy and military affairs around the world. So, and I also, when they had the debate, Trump and Kamala Harris, and then after the debate, Taylor Swift endorsed Kamala Harris. I wrote in my daily newsletter that I think this is going to be completely counterproductive, and I think it's probably going to work to Donald Trump's favor. And I think that by now there's evidence that this has actually happened. And what I think is happening is that people are no longer satisfied to passively, absorb the information that is being served them, and saying like, oh, okay, I guess, if Michael Douglas is supporting Kamala Harris and Taylor Swift is supporting Kamala Harris, they're celebrities, they know best, so I'll vote for them too. I think that people are saying like, wait a minute, why, they're messing with their heads. And right. I think the effect is that it's focusing people's attention. And, once people focus attention, if you scratch the surface of the narrative even slightly, you see that things are exactly the opposite of what they're trying to persuade us that it is. Yeah, exactly. It makes you think like, okay, so if Adolf Hitler was alive and he backed Kamala Harris, would they high five about this too?
They would spin it.
Like, this is great. I think you said it exactly correct. They think that we are stupid, and they really do. And I've noticed that idea that the masses are dumb and unsophisticated is kind of what's leading it into so many mistakes.
Right.
And one of the examples, just the other day, when Victoria Nuland was talking about, oh yeah, like we scuttled the peace in Ukraine 2 years ago. You can see first she has this unbearably ugly smirk on her face, talking, about something she did or her club there did, which cost about 600,000 dead Ukrainians and Russians. And she's explaining it as though everybody in that equation was stupid. Like they were negotiating for peace, and then the Ukrainians were starting to ask the advice, and then it became clear to them and to the Brits that the Russians really put their most important provisions in the back of the agreement, in the small print. And then they say like, aha, but she doesn't have the self-awareness to realize that she's implying that these Ukrainians were dumb,
right?
That they were these unsophisticated brutes, incapable of reading the small print, and who were going to sign something that was really, really bad for them, but for the benevolent guardianship of the neocons and the British, who helped them see through that ruse and encourage them to fight to the last Ukrainian instead. What a deal! What friends these are!
Yeah.
You always find the attitudes of these people, including the campaign manager Katzenberg and Spielberg and others. You always find this condescension towards the ordinary person, and they think that everybody's stupid and like, oh, now we're going to have Taylor Swift endorse Kamala Harris and everybody's going to back Kamala Harris. And then we're going to get Ben Stiller to say like how excited he is about like this really wonderful campaign and how it's like electrified the public.
Right. And
how it's a vote of joy and all this. People are hurting. They're not falling for this crap anymore. Their attention is focused and they're looking for a real answer. And then you see that this has an effect because what was one of the last thing that Antony Blinken came out with, that they were coordinating total censorship of RT, right? Because they're losing the propaganda war. Yeah, I think that fortunately people are not actually playing along. That is my very strong impression. They're trying to give us. They're trying to make it look like all of these things are inevitable, like resistance is futile and this is happening and we're so clever and we're so smart and we have all this technology and, thou shalt obey and all this stuff. But actually it's failing all over the place. Not so long ago, when was it? Maybe a year ago or less, they were voting on this global pandemic treaty.
Right.
And people were really freaked out because this looked like it was going to happen. And I told everybody, no, it's not going to happen. Don't worry about it. It's not going to happen. And it didn't happen. And how it didn't happen, Mel, I don't really know. It's something that's genuinely mysterious to me. But it seems to me that somehow there's some kind of a positive charge that's growing in the humanity.
I think so too. I feel it. Yeah.
Yeah. And so many of these initiatives, of these plans that they have planned with such, with all these sophisticated, clever people, Mark Carney's and Tony Blair's and all of these, people, very, 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 very important people. And they're all falling flat on their faces one after another. I'll never forget, there was a vote in the French Parliament, I think in July 2021. They were supposed to extend the COVID passport thing, where you can go to a restaurant without showing your QR code or board a plane or train, or we had to go showing our QR code certificate of vaccination. That was extremely, extremely important to them because they meant to do that run in perpetuity. And so to get us to get boosters in perpetuity and to get our QR codes validated in perpetuity.
Right.
And they voted against it. They voted it down, and it just that was the end of it. And then at the end of 2021 or 22, there was the big deal of launching a CBDC in Nigeria. Which they,
right. Yes,
it was Biden administration carefully selected Nigeria as the test market. And they launched it, and it was a complete and total fiasco. It collapsed. The whole thing was launched by force because the people of Nigeria had a referendum, and something like 95% of them voted against this.
right.
They forced it down people's throats anyway, and the whole thing collapsed in 108 days.
Wow.
And now we saw, the pandemic treaty fail, and now we saw this run up to World War III fail. That the British were all out lobbying everybody who would listen to launch World War III. And so one thing after another is failing. I cannot tell how exactly, because there isn't a leadership there. I think it's just the people are making themselves noticed, and they're making their will known to the people in power. And the people in power are starting to be very, very scared.
I agree.
Yeah,
I don't know.
I don't think that the EU has any future. I think it's going to collapse for sure. But the history of this. Okay, so basically, what these globalist imperial oligarchies had in mind is a so-called three-block world, and they've been obsessed with this since before World War II. So it predates the United Nations. The United Nations was their one of their mechanisms with which to further these goals. But the three-block world was already explicitly being sold to the Germans by the British in the run-up to World War II. So Lord Halifax had a 7-point policy for Germany based on this three-block world agenda, and basically the three blocks were Europe dominated by Germany. That'll sound familiar, right? That was basically what the EU was meant to be.
Right.
And then the Atlantic alliance between Britain and the US controlling the Western world, meaning the US and the American continent.
Right.
And East Asia being dominated by Japan, again in alliance with Britain. The common denominator to all of this is the British Empire. Britain in alliance with Germany, controlling Central and Eastern Europe. Britain in alliance with the United States, controlling the North American continent and the Atlantic, and Britain in alliance with Japan, controlling East Asia. So this was their three-block world, and then this three-block world kind of this is where the name Trilateral Commission always, getting rid of Russia was always the obsession, because Russia is one of these nuts that they cannot crack.
Right.
And so partitioning Russia, regime changing and partitioning it, making it into, balkanizing it into a number of smaller entities that they can always pit one against the other, and they can always use them as clients in the region. That has been the obsession since forever. And this is exactly the objective behind the Ukraine war.
Right.
I mean, I don't think any of your listeners will be surprised if we say that this Ukraine war wasn't really about freedom and democracy for the Ukrainians.
No, they won't. No, they won't.
It is much bigger. It is much bigger, Mel. It's so enormous. It's going to be a source of shock and awe for us for years and maybe decades going forward, because the whole world order is about to change, and this is the reason for all the turbulence. But these are things that we can speculate about today, but we're going to find out with time. One thing that I would totally agree with you is that it really feels like we're getting some kind of divine help, and I recognize it even in the sense of I think about writing an article on Substack, and then something comes in my mailbox, somebody else's article on Substack, and I see that they're tracing the same thought pattern that I was going to write about. And I thought, like, how? This is just insane. We're all kind of converging on the same truths.
Yeah.
And this is very real. And I think how do you call it? The metaphor that I like is what Isaac Newton would say, that if he could see farther, it was because he was able to stand on the shoulders of giants.
Yeah.
But today I think that we're not just standing on the shoulders of giants. I think that we have some kind of an organic growth where like we're helping each other. We're climbing on top of each other. Like ants, like termite, like some kind of a super organism, and it's just kind of growing like a vine unstoppably, and it's going to, I think, ultimately prevail. And I've been watching us win since at least 4 years now, since the pandemic, because pandemic wasn't meant to play out the way it did, but the old normal is pretty much back, and there's nothing they can do. I think that what we're going to see is in the future, and I don't know at what rate, how fast it's going to be happening. We're going to be seeing a continuing implosion of the status quo. And one thing that I have thought for a very, very long time is that these globalists, this money lending oligarchy, their basic mechanism of control over any country, any region, any society is the monetary system, is the banking system.
Yeah.
And so we have to transcend that. We have to replace the current monetary system with a new one, because the one we have now is definitely based on fraudulent relationships, and it poisons all other relationships in society. And so what's coming to us now, almost inevitably, is a crisis of stagflation, which is going to be painful. The standards of living are going to be coming down, particularly in Europe and the mothership, the United Kingdom and Japan. And I think that this crisis is going to be bad enough that the currencies are going to essentially go down to zero. I don't know how soon, historically, these kinds of crises have played out either in a very short time, a few months or a year or two.
Right.
Or they played out over a period of 10, 15 years. So I think that for Europe and the UK and Japan, maybe it's going to be faster. For the United States, it's going to be slower. But I think that the pain is going to come to the point where people are going to say, like, yeah, okay, right, we can't go on like this. We need to have a different monetary system. And by then the political circumstances are probably going to make it possible to do that, because these hostilities against Russia and against China, against Iran are not taking us anywhere good. We should cooperate and trade, and develop things that make life more enjoyable. Increase standards of living, and so in a different political environment, there would be probably cooperation between the United States and China, between the United States and Russia, and other nations, and then we would adopt. I see that the Russians and the Chinese have really conducted very extensive research of how to design a monetary system so that it serves positive purposes for society. And the solutions are understood and known and available. We need to eliminate these saboteurs who are trying to blow up the world to preserve their own system. Exactly. But I think we're on our way to achieving that. Oh, definitely not. And if you went out there banging your drums that Elvis is still alive, they wouldn't care, right? Free speech. You have free speech. They're flipping out that we're working it out. That we are starting to understand the true nature of their rule, of their governance system, and that we are moving in the direction of emancipation.
Right.
They're losing power over us. This is why they're flipping out, not because they're worried that we will misunderstand things, that we will get it, that we will get things wrong. Oh yeah, for sure. And I think we really don't need to fear anything, Mel, because to begin with, none of us are getting out of here alive anyhow. So whether that happens tomorrow or it happens in a year or 10 years or 30 years today, nobody's getting out alive. Second, there's very little that they can do, to us. To keep things in perspective, the whole in the whole of World War II, I think the United States lost 0.3% of its population. The UK lost something like 0.5%. The French lost 1.3%. And that's like the whole freaking World War that lasted more than 4 years. How many of us can get hurt if we stand our ground and keep marching forward? Exactly. Some, and they will always try to make an example, of somebody like, destroy their business or muzzle them, imprison them, kill them, and whatever. But that's going to always be an infinitesimally small number of people, and I think that the risk is, the thing that got me thinking, Mel, is there's this video on YouTube about a man, I think he's Russian or Ukrainian, I don't know, who keeps lions, and he has trained them with a slipper, right? Like a slipper, literally.
Right. Yeah.
And so since they were cubs, he would discipline them by giving them a slap on the nose with his slipper. And so now these lions are already big. And they're like big lions, 180 kilos. What's that, like 380 pounds? These are giant animals. And there's this really short video on YouTube where the male lions get into a fight between themselves. And then this man gets into the cage, and to break up the fight, he walks into the cage and he takes off his slipper and lifts it up like this. And these lions just scatter instantly, They're taking this slipper really, really seriously. And I think that this is exactly the way that these powers that be in the world have us trained.
Right.
But what happens when the lion works out that this thing is half my size and I can probably cut him in half with one swipe of my paw? Right. Are they going to still be worried about the slipper? I think not. Right. And I think that this is exactly the mass of us who want, good life, liberty, emancipation, blah, 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 all of these things. And the very, very small segment of these inbred degenerates with their slipper. Right. And I think that we're working out that this slipper isn't going to hurt very many of us. Yeah, so I'm on Twitter. My handle is @NakedHedgie. Sorry, on X, right?
Oh, right.
Formerly known as Twitter. My Substack is Alex Krainer's Trend Compass. And then I have the professional website related to my day job of trading and investment management, which is iSystem Trend Following.